Anyway, we're going to be talking about we're going to be talking about pressure, all right? And we're going to start from the beginning. If you guys really want me to go through the nitty-gritty, I will. Pressure is something that is very, very simple. It occurs basically anytime you get your opponent to block and you begin a string. It doesn't necessarily have to be a true string, it just has to be a string. What I mean by that is pressure doesn't really happen if, like, for example, if this happens, this isn't really pressure, right? Because I don't really have a turn here. Like, I have some options I can do, maybe. If I call an assist, I can definitely take my turn and then begin my pressure in that regard. But, if this is blocked in neutral, this is not really accomplishing a whole lot. Pressure is going to refer to strictly any time we get our opponents to block. And there are different types of pressure that we often engage in. WTG pressure, or the pressure that we talk about the most often, and we're going to use it colloquially, is called stagger pressure. But we kind of use the term a little bit more broadly than most people refer to as staggers. Staggers are basically any time you reset your string back to basics. So, for those of you that don't know what a string is, Dragon Ball relies on a stringing system. That means you go from light, medium, light, basically, light, medium, heavy. Just like your auto combo. Light, medium, heavy. Light, medium, heavy, special or unique attack, special, 2-3-6 move. Very, very basic stuff. Okay? This is basically how every character, except very few exceptions, structure their pressure. And the reason why this is important is because this is going to be the foundation for what we do. First things first, we do what's called stagger pressure, which means you go from... See, right there, I went from my medium back to my lights. You can't actually do this. My opponent can always mash here. See? And there's nothing I can do about it. Now, if my opponent decides to mash and I do a frame trap, so let's say I do... They get hit. They get hit. Boom. Done. The foundation of all pressure is going to be resets and frame traps. We call resets staggers. Basically, staggers resets and vice versa. You'll hear that a lot. And we call frame traps exactly that. Frame trap means that there is a gap large enough for your opponent to try something, but it is too small for your opponent to actually be successful in anything that's not a frame 1 option. In other words, if it's not a DP, if it's not a level 3, and if it's not reflect, you're probably dying if you frame trap somebody and they try to. Like that. See? And it's pretty easy to kill. And now, here's some common things. Number 1, you can frame trap within a family of buttons. For example, you can frame trap your lights if you have a 4L, if you have a 2L. See? You can easily do that. And then, of course, mediums, vice versa. You can even frame trap, heavies if you want to. You can do basically anything that you want. The only thing that you can't really frame trap, unless you're certain characters, is specials. So, basics unlocked. These are going to be the foundation for our normal stuff. This is basically it, and whatnot. And I'm not really sure why so many people struggle with this. Now, a very common question that I get a lot is, how do I start my string? Very, very, very simple. You want to start your string the same way against anyone. So now, notice how at the beginning, it looked like a normal block string, but notice how it's kind of slower. This is because I'm fishing for my opponent to interact, and how they interact is going to tell me everything that I need to know. But if they don't interact, that's okay, because this is actually quite safe. There is no real threat here. Now, if your opponent level 3s you or DPs, that is also telling you something very important. And generally speaking, with level 3s, you want to kind of just keep an eye on their bar. You want to keep an eye on the position, and of course you want to keep track on whether or not you have an actual follow-up after a certain normal. So for example, if I do this and I don't have an assist, you're pretty much always free. There's literally nothing I can do to keep you here. Like, if I do, at that point, it's literally just fear. Yo, thank you so much for the donation, Spiky. I really, really, really appreciate it. That is so kind of you, man. Wow. Really warms my heart. Thank you. But yeah. That is the homie, yeah. I also forgot to mention, guys, that there is stuff to encourage donations as well. As I go through this, you guys are more than welcome to ask me any questions. I'll answer them for free, obviously. But if you guys want me to demonstrate or explore anything character-specific and whatnot, if you donate even like $1 and whatnot and tell me the character that you want, I'll go ahead and take a look at them for you and try to answer some questions that are more specific and geared to what you're looking for. I'm not going to spend too much time on the basics, guys, just because we've had so much YouTube content at this point with this. Like, at this point, you guys should know this, but for those of you that don't, we're just going to basically keep it to create respect, abuse respect. The foundation of stagger pressure. The foundations of stagger pressure are all going to revolve around your ability to create respect around your threats. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. So, how do we create a threat? What is a threat? Well, a threat, right, is basically like in real life, right? If I have my hands up. So like if I go, yo, I'm gonna punch you in the face, which you shouldn't do in real life, Twitch, this is just an example, all right? But if I go up to you and I'm like, hey, yo, I'm gonna punch you in the face, right? And I'm credible and you believe me, that's a threat. I have now threatened you. I have basically warned you of potentially an imminent threat of danger. Now, another way I can threaten you, perhaps non-verbally, is if I lift up my hands into a fighting position and I'm inching towards you with a certain look in my eye. If I have that certain look in my eye, you know, I'm gonna hit you, you know, and that can also create a sensation of a threat. And in Dragon Ball, it's very, very, very simple. You might be wondering, well, how the hell do I know what a threat is if I'm constantly getting punched in the face? Like, you're always trying to punch people, so what's the threat here? Well, just like this, remember, we mentioned earlier that there is a chain. If there is a chain, right, then, and I'm doing this, right, if there is a chain there, there's also the threat of 5LL. And I'm not going to go through the whole song and dance where I demonstrate basically damage, but obviously, you know, you can even tell if I just do a normal B&B. Versus if I hit you with 5LL. That is a pretty astronomical difference. You don't want to get hit by 5LL. A lot of characters have TOD starters from this. A lot of characters can kill you off of this. Even if they don't, they have some special routes that they can do. And like Blue Goku, you know, you're losing more than half your health bar. You know? Even if they're mashing out of the corner. Generally speaking, that threat is massive. If you're mashing, you're probably doing it with the light button, right? So if you're mashing, because your light buttons are so fast, you're going to basically mash out with your lights, and you're going to get the first column of damage, where, okay, maybe you get a cool root or whatever, maybe you get an assist, maybe you get a bleeding character out, that's pretty neat, but at the same time, you know, it doesn't matter. The point is that you're still in a pretty decent amount of danger, because if you're wrong, your opponent kills you. But if you're right, your opponent may not be taking that much damage to begin with. Now, obviously, if they have like 2 pixels of health, you know, anything will work, but the point being is that threats, generally speaking, are very, 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 very easy to understand. A threat is basically what your opponent can do afterwards. So if I do 5LL is a threat. Now, if you block 5LL, 2M is a threat. If 2M is a threat, 5M becomes a threat. 5S becomes a threat. 5H becomes a threat. Anything I can Gatling into becomes a threat, because especially if you're Blue Goku, everything just scales like a medium. Everything does too much damage. You're not going to survive. It's not going to be a lot of fun for you. And we use these threats to essentially kind of get the opponent to respect This is called creating respect. Now, we also want to abuse the respect because eventually your opponent's going to start blocking forever. We've all fought those opponents, right? Press 1 in the chat if you fought those opponents that basically make you feel like you're fighting a bot and they turned on guard all or whatever, you know? Yeah, we've all fought those opponents and they're annoying, right? Or maybe you are that opponent, you know? Maybe you also have godlike defense and you're just like, bruh, you ain't shit, you know? Maybe you're like, bro, you ain't shit, you know, blah, 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 whatever, you know? But what's important at the end of the day, right? What's important at the end of the day is that you manage your threats. Now, here's a problem, right? If your opponent notices that you do this a lot, they're eventually going to start taking risks because there is a gap here, which means they're probably going to reflect. If the gap is egregious enough, or if you're predictable enough with your pressure patterns, you're doing the same thing over and over again, resetting in the same places, you have the same gaps, everything has the same timing, suddenly your opponent's going to mash on you and you're going to die. Because now, even though you were trying to apply a threat, your threat weakens the less you use it. It is the responsibility of anybody who does any kind of pressure to find the sweet spot between creating respect and abusing respect. You cannot do the same things over and over and over and over and over again, but you also have to make sure that you are taking calculated risks. Like, you have to make sure that you are demonstrating that you are prepared to do your thing. Ambiguity is the key here. If you are ambiguous, you do a fantastic job and you start really messing with your opponent where they're not really going to know what hit them. And you're just using 2 of your options. Okay? So once we have enough a respect, we can start staggering. As you guys see, I'm resetting here. And this can allow us to abuse respect. So how do we abuse respect? Like, how do we add to this? Very, very, very simple. By adding mix-ups. That's one way you can spice things up. You know, add a DR. But if your opponent can tech DR, can they tech dash DR? You know? We can add 6M. You know, we can add 6M and start having a grand old time. You know? Start having a grand old time. You know, start doing some plus on block stuff. Pretty cool. You know, we can add some 6Ms. We can add some cross ups. We can add some fake cross ups. We can add We can add character specific mix ups, like, you know, Goku's unreactable command grab. The world is your oyster here, right? Now we'll talk about mix ups a little bit later, but that's an example of how you can structure your pressure and offense to begin opening up your opponents pretty consistently. All right, do we have any questions so far? Anything you guys want answer? Anything that you need? I will take any questions because the next section is going to be a little bit long. No questions yet. All right. So now we're going to examine every single button. I'm sure everyone's familiar. If when in doubt, guys, 2L, 5L. 2L, 5L. That will create all of the respect that you need. 2L, 5L. And pick an option. 2L, 5L DR. 2L, 5L bait an option. 2L, 5L frame trap. 2L, 5L reset. 2L, 5L, 2L, 5L IED. 2L, 5L IED. 2L, you know. You guys get the idea. That's the homework. Now, here's the thing. Any advanced player watching this at this point in time will probably tell you that what I'm doing is not necessarily particularly difficult to block. And that's kind of where a lot of students run into trouble, because they're doing 2L, 5L, they're hitting their friends with it, And then they start fighting really good players, or they come across a really good player, and then they're like, shit, what do I do? This is how we go beyond that. And to do that, we need to examine a lot of critical aspects about every particular character. So this will be the section where you guys, if you would like, can donate, and I will demonstrate with a particular character of your choice. This is going to blend in with the next section, which is about routing or routing your pressure. But we're going to talk about every single button and how all of the buttons interact to make up basically a character's pressure structure. So first things first, what is a pressure structure? Every character has a unique way that they can layer their pressure differently. For example, Blue Goku has a command grab, so Blue Goku can do stuff like this. He also has extreme reach, so his 2M reaches very far. See, as you can see. Oops. And knowing his reaches and his buttons, very important, you know? And it's a good way to help him understand his pressure. You can get a sense of his timing. It is your responsibility to learn the pressure structure for each of the characters that you play. For example, Beerus has, you know, the same principles. He's bound by the same rules. But Beerus has a couple of issues. If I do the thing I was doing, first of all, he doesn't have more than one Ki Blast. He doesn't have a multi-hit 5S where he can just hold it and it comes out. Not only that, but his 5M isn't exactly far-reaching. His 5L can be, but he can space himself out if he's not careful. Not only that, but his 2M has different properties. He does have the reach with 2M, but unlike Blue Goku's 2M, it doesn't travel with a hitbox. His pressure is going to be structured a little bit differently, because he also has differing frame data, which we will discuss later. Frame data is overrated, and we will talk about that in a little bit. Unless you're Gogeta, and in that case, frame data becomes very important. But anyway, so how do we structure with Beerus' pressure? Well, we have to work around his tiny jab. We have to work around his 5M, which reaches decently far, but not that far. And we have to see if he has any tools that we can work with. So, for example, unlike Blue Goku, his 5M is safe on block. Blue Goku's is -8 unless he does 4. Now his 2L is similarly minus, but unlike Blue Goku's 2M, there is a massive cancel window. A cancel window is basically the length of time that you have before the computer forces you to reset. For example, if I'm playing Blue Goku, right? I can do that. Let me see actually if I can demonstrate this. Turn on the command history for this one. So, as you can see right here, that's 17 frames. The startup is 17 frames. If I delay it, you can see that I'm hitting M, and nothing's happening. And then when M finally comes out, it says 10 frames. That means it's a reset. Blue Goku's 2M has a shockingly bad cancel window. It's actually hard to nail the max timing. I can get it to 19 frames, but that's pretty tough. Meanwhile, watch what happens if I do this. 26 frames. It's a playlist, I have no idea. But, point being, I have a very large cancel window off of 5M, which means that my frame traps can come out at any point in time without it being a forced reset. Which means that if your opponent's trying to OS you and mash a little bit later, like they're trying to fuzzy mash at a later timing that might catch you off guard, oops, wrong thing. This is going to say, I'm sorry, no, you don't get to do that. You actually have to hold this, and you have to be careful. And that's something that's pretty cool. And larger cancel windows can do this for you. Now, Blue Goku, some normals lock you into the recovery. This is actually the problem with Gogeta Blue. It's not that Gogeta Blue's frame data necessarily sucks, although it does. It's more that some of his buttons have a very short cancel window, which means that he cannot really play this very intricate mind game with mediums the way other characters can. And that's something that can kind of potentially hurt him if he doesn't have an assist. We'll come back to that later, but basically, cancel windows are a big part of how we can structure our pressure. Could you possibly demonstrate it with 18 since you donated? Yes, but there's nothing really that unique that 18 does. Like, she has pretty basic pressure. It's just really messed up mix-ups. Oh. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. I wish I could read your name, but this thing is kind of annoying. But yeah, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Now, here's the thing, right? Beerus has an incredible cancel window on his 5M. Or on his 2M, sorry. So even though he can do this, he can start playing with pressure a little bit more, you know, he can start getting cute with pressure. Oh my god, it's been a while. I haven't played Beerus in like a month. Ooh. You know, you can start doing some... Wow. They need to buff his... They need to buff that. Chat, press 1 if you think Beerus needs a buff on his... You know. And then, of course, this creates very interesting implications for his staggers. Because he can always reset, and when he does, he's plus, he can also push you away if you try to reflect it. If you try to reflect, he can actually attack you with a low. And then, of course, that buys frame advantage, you know? There's a million ways that he can begin to root his pressure, which is a little bit different, because Blue Goku does not have that unique 2S, and Blue Goku also doesn't have that crazy cancel window on his 2M. So while Blue Goku can do something similar by attacking Reflect like this, and then command grabbing from a pretty big distance, Beerus has to structure his pressure a little bit differently. So today, I'm going to be giving you guys the tools to structure your pressure with any character that you want. I'll demonstrate this with 18 since my kind donor, Spiky, requested it. But if you guys also want me to cover something that you request, please don't hesitate to donate. It is to recover lost wages because I have been extremely sick and I had to take some time off work. But any help, I really appreciate it. But thank you. Anyway, so just like before, lights, mediums, unique attack can be used at any time. You can use your unique attack before your heavies. I like to use it after, personally, but I do both. You just have to remember where you put your threats. For example, if I do this, there's actually not a lot stopping my opponent from becoming a little bit more disrespectful on this. Now, some characters can play with this, others can't. For example, 18 can do that, which leads to buying respect for that. And you can end up in some fun situations. Now, are these situations fake? Yes. Your opponent can get out of them. But mixing in fake options with real options is a great way to keep your opponent on their toes. Because not everything is fake, and they may not recognize that something's fake in time. Oops. There we go. Anyway. So, 18 has some pretty interesting and unique characteristics to her pressure. For example, her 5M reaches pretty far. She has a standard fare, fairly everything, but she does have something that is pretty unique. Like Beerus, she can 2S. Her 2S is +7. You can jump cancel this in Spark. She also has an interesting JS, which is actually quite ambiguous to block, honestly. Like, this is I've actually hit people pretty successfully with this. And if you know what side you're going to end up on, you can start doing stuff like that, but, you know, you will eventually end up going halfway across the screen. But sometimes you end up in a situation like that, which is pretty cool. And that can be very, very, very scary. So these are ways that she can set up little traps. Now, unlike Blue Goku, we can infer that Blue Goku is a character that's kind of like a battering ram. The way his pressure is structured, there's not a lot in the ways of mix-ups. He doesn't really have that many unique buttons. But Blue Goku does have incredibly powerful stagger pressure, and he has huge threats, such as an unreactable command grab that reaches fairly decently far and can be tick thrown off of. He also has a very far-reaching command grab that he can throw in and mix in with his other options at any time. Both of them yield fairly high reward. Now, 18 has that too, which is something that makes her pretty interesting because at any points, she can command grab. And this actually makes her a little bit difficult to reflect. Ken, what do you mean by that? Because she has a standing low, she can actually structure her lights in a way that attack anything that requires a standing input in order to get off. So for example, reflect is, 4S, which means that you can target it. You actually have to stand in order to reflect, but it also targets the 2-1-4 motion, which if you notice the end of it requires you to stand. So it's actually pretty dangerous to do anything to her rather than outright mash. She can abuse this because she can do stuff like that. And then you have the grab that discourages reflect to begin with. This makes her a little bit harder to disrespect than characters like, for example, Beerus or Kefla, which do not have command grabs and therefore are a little bit more vulnerable to reflect. Now, that vulnerability is minute. It really depends on the character and the toolkit. But, point is, these are really interesting situations, and they all require the same foundational knowledge. What are your threats? How do we identify those threats? What can you do? And it all starts with the power of 5L. 5L, for the most part, is probably one of your most important buttons. For me, this is a little bit more theoretical. I try not to make assessments like this, but for me personally, in the way I pressure, and the way that I like to pressure and open people up, the most important buttons on any character for me: 5L, 2M, 5S. Those are the big three buttons for me. 5L, 2M, and 5S. It's the first thing that I check when I play a character. So for example, this absurd reach is so lovely, and I can really play with that because I do play a little bit with a Ki Blast Mind Game. And let's talk about 5L. 5L kind of has an issue. Hi, I want to offer a promotion to your channel. Oh, God damn it. Why are people like this? Guys, please do not click that link. Let me go ahead and ban this person. There we go. Anyway. Yeah, I like Fuzzy, Saber. You guys are mods. Gotta help me out here. But anyway, so 5L, very important. The reason why 5L is very important is because 5L is essentially how you're going to structure your pressure. It is the first button that you use, and for most characters, it's oftentimes going to be the safest. It's -3. It is Blueku's second safest button after 4M. This is very powerful, because he can stagger this, and Blueku also has a 4M. Not every character does. The 4M means that he can make his resets from 5L very ambiguous, as you can see there. So right there, one of those was a frame trap, one of those was a reset. Good luck figuring out which. If you look at my command history, you could probably tell. In a real match, though, if you mash incorrectly, you're probably dying. And that's also a 5L, which you want to be very careful about, because 5L carries the R. So reflecting somebody doing this is very risky because you're very likely to get your DR or your reflect thrown. It also yields enough advantage where you can start crossing up afterwards, and it's incredibly powerful. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to like crack open every single player that you hit, but press 1 if you fought a really good player in the chat and you've hit them with like tap and then you just crossed up and then the cross up hits them. Press 1 if you hit a really good player with that. There we go. There we go, my friends. And you already know the power of 5L. Now, 2L can be just as important. 2L is the mix button, but it is not necessary. For me, while I do love low 2Ls, and I do find them very, very important, they are not necessarily the end-all be-all unless you're trying to fold in 50-50s. If you're trying to fold in a 50-50, then it depends on how your characters can do it. But honestly, a low 2L is kind of overrated, as Gogeta Blue's proving, because his 50-50s are really stupid, and his 2L is 9 frames. So not every character has 9 frames, but can you really tell the difference between 9 and 10 frames? Like, are you guys really that? Like, are we counting frames at this point to determine? Like, do you think that, like, Gogeta Blue's mix-up is completely unreactable, but then suddenly you add 1 frame to that 2L, and suddenly you can react to it? Like, it's not that big. Most 2Ms are usually about 10 frames. So just keep that in mind. But yeah. So a 2L mixes in with the lights, but a 2L is less flexible usually because 2Ls don't have as many Gatling options, which means like from 2L, I can't really DR. I can't, I just automatically, as you can see from my command history, it's just prioritizing the L button, even though I'm hitting the DR macro. So that happens. However, if I do this, boom, surprise, This is very important to keep in mind. This is how we will begin to mount our threats. You also threaten the single best starter in the game, as we established earlier, 5LL. 5LL is the best starter in the game. Most characters hit you with this, you're probably dead. If not, you are absolutely in two-touch city. So, how does 18 fare? Well, she does have a standard 2L. Her 5L has 2 unique things about it. It is -4, but it is also a low, which means that it beats things that low crushes. So, for example, Vegito would have a very hard time mashing out of people's pressure unless they space themselves out too far, where they can't reach, but he can. However, against 18, a character like Vegito Blue can probably 2L her 5L, which is annoying. However, if you're not Vegito and playing a Privileged Fusion, it's a very similar structure. Now, she also doesn't have a 4LL, which means that we have to rely on her 2L a little bit more. See? As you can see what I'm doing, this is very similar to the 2L pattern that we demonstrated with Blue Goku. But 5L is also how she's going to structure her pressure. However, you have to be careful because her 5L will space out her light grab. But not if she dashes. Medium grab, though, is up for grabs. Anyway. And she still has a lot of the same things. We will discuss the importance of pushback later. However, we will discuss a bunch of stuff pretty soon. Now, just like Blue Goku, however, she is threatening 5LL, and her 5LL is very, very, very powerful. Now, Blue Goku's is as well. It doesn't have as good of a cancel window, and it's a bit slower. Actually, it's about the same. However, Blue Goku's hits low, hers doesn't. Which means that you cannot realistically defend on these characters the same way. You have to block them low, and you have to be very careful about when you choose to disrespect them. Because both of them can be disrespected, but very differently from one another. Then you get to their mediums. Generally, there are 2 kinds. Medium buttons are very, very important. So, light, I want you guys, I'll even pause the music for this, okay? I want you guys to really, really, really listen to this. You guys hear the difference? There's a difference in the sound of the block stun. It's very, very subtle. You might not be able to hear it. So just in case, I'll even blow your ears out. We'll turn up the sound effects volume all the way up. Listen carefully. Notice how all three of them have completely different sounds. They all have completely different sounds. That's important because they have a different amount of block stun. That affects their se suenan distinto. A little bit. Yeah, they sound different, yeah. Distinto. Yeah. This is very, very important. They have different amounts of block stun. I've demonstrated this multiple times with adult Gohan, so I'm not going to go ahead and go down that easy route, but you can check for any character. For example, we can actually verify that right now. Even with her lower frame data, the soonest frame trap that I can get off before I get hit with 18 is 19 frames. That is the soonest frame trap that I can do before I get hit. But what if I do 18, 20? Oops. 20? 21. So notice how I have about 2 extra frames to work with off of 5LL to beat that mash. 21 frames versus 17 frames. 17 to 19 frames versus, on average, 19 to 21 frames. That is a pretty big difference. Now, you might be wondering, can they really tell the difference? Yes. Because that means that you can essentially frame trap later from your 5M, from your 5L. Like, you can frame trap fairly late from your mediums, and you actually they have less time to respond, essentially. So what that means is a lot of people respond to timing. You probably heard us refer to this as rhythm. Your rhythm is very, very important. Generally speaking, I try to avoid and try to keep my rhythm even. We're not going to talk about rhythm today because, in my opinion, rhythm is something that can be talked about endlessly. But regardless, and we'll talk about rhythm another day, the point being here is that every character has a different timing, and your lights have a lot more or a lot less block stun. So what that means is if you're constantly staggering your lights, it might be easier for them to pick apart your timing on your lights and mash a little bit easily. For those of you that train with me, this is why I find it so easy to mash on you. But notice that there are times where you get hit, where you do that, and then suddenly people get hit. And it's because they're responding to the timing. People don't count the frames in their head, but they feel the frames. So it doesn't have to be exactly a 21 frame trap, but it has to feel to your opponent like a 21 frame trap. And because the frame traps feel a little bit longer going from your mediums to a medium versus a light to your medium, this generally means that if they respond to the light to medium timing where they would be correct, they might die for that same timing if it's a medium to medium. Especially if they don't know that. So, as a result, you may have noticed whenever I do something, notice how I seem to always, not always, but, usually reset on either 5S or reset on a medium. This is why. Because, or see how that feels the same. Like, notice how that reset into 2L from that 5L feels the same as a frame trap. It felt the same to 2M. You know what I mean? Like, Obviously, they're not the same, but they feel the same. And that's important. And that's pretty cool. And that's how you can use your mediums. Mediums are powerful reset points. Even if they're very minus or unsafe on block, your opponent may not necessarily take the risk because that frame trap is very scary. And you can create a lot of respect this way. Mediums are important. Do not forget them. One of the biggest issues that I see with a lot of my students is once they get to their mediums, they don't know what to do. Figure out how to route back to your lights from your medium. Every character has a unique way of doing it. Every character has a unique timing. Some characters are better at it than others. We'll talk about that soon. I always forget that these VODs are not immediately available here. I'm sorry. But yeah. So, that's something to keep in mind about how you can use your mediums. Now, Blue Goku, ooh, let me see. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. Anyway, then there's Blue Goku, another character. Now, notice how he has a little bit of a unique thing that we'll discuss later in comparison to 18. Namely, the amount of pushback that he has. He also has a bit of a larger disjoint. His hurt box does not advance as much. And it cannot advance at all if he doesn't want it to. Versus... Notice how 18 plays a lot closer. Ranges of your normals are very, very important. So, when considering a button, you need to consider what comes after the button. So, for example, do you have any unique options or unique ways that you can reset your pressure? Safe ways that you can take your turn back or anything like that? Or, more importantly, consider the reach. So, for example... 18 has to play a little bit closer to home, which means that her rhythm naturally has to be a little bit faster than Blue Goku's. However, she can basically buy a lot of respect this way, because she is pretty nimble and pretty quick, and at any point, if she slows down, that becomes hard to see. And if you don't know how to disrespect this, she's just getting free plus frames, and you're like, okay, well, if I see her stop, I'm going to super dash. The amount of people that I've seen that had their startup stuffed by 6M, and then I convert with an assist, because I thought that they could disrespect this, is too high. You also have to observe if there's any particular patterns to your characters. And you can start getting creative. Now, when I look for mix-ups and when I mess around and whatnot, I try to find little ways that I can use these tools, and my biggest question is, can I hide this? So, for example, let's say I want to do this, right? Like, let's say I want to do that. How do I hide that? Well, that's hidden very easily in this, because they look very similar, but the results are very different. And the timing is different too. You can start messing with people in this regard. And it can become very difficult to tell what your opponent is doing. You can also bait them into reacting and responding in different ways, all by understanding their unique options, which brings us to their unique attacks. I'm going to talk about the unique attacks because the unique attacks are very important. Some have fast ki blasts, some have a lot of ki blasts, some characters have this, some characters have unique properties, you know, like this on their 2S. And then there are going to be some characters, like, for example, Blue Goku, that doesn't. See, nothing, there's no 2S, no nothing, just the good old ki blasts. Now, why is this important? Because the 2S is a very important part of our toolkit, and so are our Ki Blasts. One of the beautiful things about our Ki Blasts is that they are reflectable, which means that you can start playing a very dangerous mind game, a mind game that wins, that players used to win even now. Now, in 2022, 5 years after this game came out, and we still have good old reflect mind game. 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 And because of that, your opponent has a choice. They can choose to respect it, and if they start respecting it, this is where things become a little bit not fun. How is this not fun? Well, notice how I get progressively more advantageous on block. And if I keep my 5H, like I could with Blue Goku, I can attack even from large distances where you think that I can't. So I can literally do that. Which allows me to buy time to do stuff like that. Which is very powerful. Ki Blasts are very, very important to the point where a character without them is actually a little bit at a disadvantage compared to characters with them. Even Beerus has them. And Beerus has a good one because his is always -2 even point blank. While certain characters like, for example, 18, -3, Blue Goku, -4. So, what are some characters that can't take advantage of this? How can we... and what can they do? Well, it doesn't mean that they're incapable, and some characters can have their own unique version of it. Some characters have a very good version of it. But generally speaking, characters without this mind game can run into some issues. So I do think that it is important to spend a little bit of time with our pressure. So you might be wondering, well, what do you mean? Why is Krillin there? Krillin has a 5S. You are correct. But look how we structure 5S. Like, notice how I use it to reset and then threaten the 5H after this. And sometimes I'll threaten to grab afterwards as well. I'm controlling an interaction point with Blue Goku in a way that constantly keeps my opponent on their toes, where they are unable to effectively leverage anything while also managing their distances. I can begin to attack him from very far away now in a way that other characters might not be able to. So let's take a look at Krillin. How does Krillin stack up with this? Well, Krillin's got a pretty terrible jab. So already we have a problem. This is minus. This is very minus. So he can still kind of do this. He can also do this, which is a little bit more of a commitment. But it's not as good as Blue Goku. Because notice how there's like a weird kind of gap or lag almost. And because I lunge forward with every attack, it's actually very hard for me to frame trap properly. I got a delay. Ooh, he has priority. Never mind. Good on you, Krillin. Good shit. But this does not feel smooth. Like, it's really hard for me to describe it, but it does not, like, that's cool and all, but it does not feel as smooth as... I don't even think it looks as smooth. Meanwhile, with Krillin... See, my M... I targeted my M at the same time that I would have with Blue Goku. I actually have to delay it. I have to slow down my rhythm. Which kind of hurts. And the worst part is that I'm no longer able to threaten a low. Which is unfortunate. It's also pretty easy to space myself out. I can't space myself out as far as I'd like to, unless I go and commit to the 5H. But at a certain point now, I'm telegraphing what options that I have. Meanwhile, Blue Goku, 5M, 2M, 5H, shoulder, ID, 6M, even, which is dumb. Krillin, at a certain point, begins to lose that, and as a result, he has to begin playing this a little bit closer. Now, this I kind of almost like. Like, this is almost like the 18 thing, but the problem is that it's prone to kind of whiffing. Like that. Which is kind of scary for me. So, while Krillin can do it, he is still at a little bit of a disadvantage in a way that every other character kind of isn't. And he can't take advantage of his unique tools the way, you know, the way Beerus can. Or 18 even. Where 18 can just, you know... Boom. So, Krillin kind of struggles there. So what about Goku Black? Goku Black has his own unique version of it, because he can do stuff like this. Which is neat, I guess. Goku Black players like to think that this is good, because, you know, if they disrespect, you can immediately cancel. You can immediately cancel into 2H. But he can't really play a range game as easily. And this is where we get into a little bit of a controversial area, where Goku Black is able to do everything that we've described up until this point. We've also talked about what a threat is. A threat also has to be something that is a little bit more substantial. And some of them require these threats in order for their pressure to become very scary. And Goku Black having a poor jab actually makes his pressure a little bit weaker. Which is not good. And then Jiren... Oh. I don't feel like I'm explaining the best that I can, but... Now, Jiren is very, very slow and very minus. So he's not using this as a reset point. Now, he probably could if he gets lucky and buys enough respect, but that is nowhere near as safe or as versatile as... That's nowhere near as safe or as versatile as characters like Beerus or Blue Goku or Kefla, Team Gohan, 18, the Vegetas, that kind of thing. So, definitely worth taking a look at. And now that we have Jiren on the screen, that brings us to our last big threat, Heavies. His Heavy is a command grab. How do I convert that? Wow, weird. This is not the best. It is a command grab. It is fine. It is something to watch out for. But I don't think it's worth the cost of one of your buttons. Where somebody like Blue Goku, for example, can still threaten after his 5H without committing, and still grab you afterwards. Including his light grab, by the way. which, in my opinion, is way more threatening and way scarier because he has a long-range threat that basically pulls him right back to the face of the opponent, and then, of course, you know, lets him set up a grab. And I think that that's a lot more versatile, a versatile way to do it, especially since it's the way every other character besides Jiren does it. Jiren kind of lacks a little bit, and therefore it makes this very easy to see coming. Now, he does have an extra 2S, which is fine, but this is more of an anti-air. It's more of like a secondary 2H. It's very powerful. It can stop opponents from being, you know, cheeky. You know, and he can Gatling to keep it safe. You know? But he can't go into his heavies afterwards. His 2H is going to switch buttons. And he can't 5H 2H the way every other character can. He also can't 2H 5H, which is kind of unfortunate. I guess he could do that, but he can't really convert. Doesn't really work well on block for obvious reasons, because it's a grab. Now, this actually does substantially weaken his stagger pressure, because basically it forces him to lean on this. And that's kind of why a lot of people may be surprised when I tell them I don't like Jiren's pressure. They think that pressure comes from one button. It's not enough. You need more. You need more. Because eventually, your opponent will reflect. And you might be like, well, what if I do this? And it's like, okay, well then your opponent's going to start fuzzy jumping. Like, your stagger pressure can be quite scary. Jiren can definitely be scary here. But him never being able to move past his 2L means that a reset from that 2L is extremely likely. More likely than it would be for any other character, and that lack of ambiguity can really cost him. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're a Jiren player, you're completely shit out of luck, or it doesn't mean that you don't necessarily... Oh, thank you for the subscription, Chavez. I appreciate it. I really appreciate how generous you guys have been today. I really do. It makes it a little bit easier to do this. Getting my motivation back. So expect more WTG in 2023. I promise. But yeah. So like the point is that if you're a Jiren player or if you play, you know, Goku Black or Krillin, you do have to understand that while you do have options, you're not exactly, it's not unviable. And I'm not going to be like, wow, you really need to, you guys can't play Jiren. You know, you guys should not be playing Jiren. I'm not going to say that. However, and Jiren is a scary character in his own right. But the thing is that you, for a great tool that you would have, you're lacking something very fundamental that a lot of other characters have, and some of them even have extremely strong tools on top of having the universal stuff, which in my opinion is the optimal configuration. Heavies are important. So you might be wondering, when do you use your heavies? Heavies are your last resort. They also allow for the largest and most dangerous of frame traps, because they also cancel into specials. Depending on the character specials, that can be plenty dangerous. And they can even space you out as well, because 5H is huge. And you can even start staggering between doing 5H, 5S, 5S, 5H, which basically keeps your 5H a threat. That is how you use your heavies. So, for example, you might see me do a pattern where I'll do like light, medium, 5S, you know, because then I'm showing that I'm resetting a lot. Then sometimes I'll do that. And then from there, oh, see, now I'm using my unique tools. So you probably thought that I was going to call an assist. Nope. And then I can easily do, especially if I do oops. See? And then You see what I mean? You can start getting a little bit creative with it. With Blue Goku, it's the same principle where I start, I don't expect you guys to be able to do these patterns comfortably for a while. Like, if you guys are seeing this and you're like, man, I really want to pressure like that, it's probably not going to happen. It's going to be a very, very long time. But you could keep the principles that I'm applying and use them to formulate your own pressure structures. For example, make sure your 5H remains a threat. It's usually going to be one of your biggest buttons. It has the most priority of any button as well. It will beat like Lab Coat Lariat on startup and things like that. It will beat out most jabs if they're not careful, that kind of thing. If your 5H becomes active at the same time as that jab, your 5H is going to win. As long as it becomes active around the same time. Which makes it very scary to mash, you know? And it's just a good way to think of it. And then, of course, specials. You want to end your special. You want to end on specials. I like to use specials as a threat to demonstrate that I will use it. I do want to demonstrate that I will use my specials because a lot of specials are medium scaling starters and things like that. So when choosing a special to end your turn on or choosing a special to reset with an assist on, try to think about the unique properties of it. So for example, I have a shoulder, but Beerus has a mix-up. So make sure you understand the integrity of your the integrity of your pressure, and that could be something that would be very helpful. But that's going to be kind of that's going to be our demonstration on how you can route your pressure from every single button. And you can use these principles to investigate their routing because every character is unique. Every character has unique ways of going back into stuff, which is where it's going to bring us back to one of my most important things. Frame data does not matter because we know how to route our pressure. Frame data does not matter. You might be wondering, what do you mean frame data doesn't matter? But I've heard of Gogeta Blue. Yeah, about that. So, the biggest thing about frame data is that frame data doesn't actually change anything. The reason why frame data is important to know is for two reasons. Number one, it is very important. It is very important to know when you are safe on something that you are forced to end on. So frame data for specials, very, very, very important. It's also very important to know how minus you are on whiff on something. For example, Blue Goku is minus 33, right? I'm going to show you the situations where frame data becomes very, very important. So, minus 33, that's my medium. Minus 33, but that's my jab. I have seen Yasha die for this. This is the reality that every Gogeta Blue player must encounter. Now, don't cry for Gogeta. He's got a lot of really cool stuff. But how much recovery you have on something is very, 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 very important to know. Because the more minus you are, the less active you are, the less range you cover, the more dangerous that particular option becomes. Now, as you guys can see, I tapped M again. That's because Gogeta Blue more or less has the same cancel window as Blue Goku. Which is a problem, because Gogeta can't really stop guard cancel. He can't really stop guard cancel, because he can't cancel into a super, unless he cancels it early. And he loses access to his 2H, and he loses access to his anti-air DP. So it's actually really annoying for Gogeta to do this. Now, can the same thing be done to Blue Goku? Of course. But Blue Goku can do this. Gogeta can't. When he starts his pressure, he has to keep going because his moves are not very flexible. Now, don't misunderstand me. Do I think Gogeta's pressure is bad? Yes. Do I think that matters? No. And the reason why is because he will mix you from pretty much any assist anywhere on the screen. But that brings us back to the philosophy of why I think Blue Goku, for example, has stronger pressure than Blue Gogeta. Blue Goku can also 50-50 you in even dirtier mix-ups anywhere on the screen for half a bar. But you might notice I don't really do that very often. Why? Well, because assists are expensive. I'm probably using these assists to win neutral, you know? Gogeta kind of has to be a bully in neutral to win as quickly as possible, get those assists back, but if he doesn't have an assist... This is the most common thing I see that Gogetas do. Where they're just going to start IEDing back, they're going to start, you know, trying to avoid the opponent, and that is a little bit of a weakness. Now, of course, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that he's bad. I'm bringing this up because I think it's very important to discuss in the world of pressure the things that Gogeta Blue lacks in order to show you guys what you need that can be very, very powerful with your characters if you don't play this one. You know? Now, like I said, don't cry for Gogeta Blue. He's fine. But right now. But the point is that he's got a bad cancel window on his 2L, bad cancel window on his 2M, and this can make it difficult. Now he can do this, but remember, no 4LL, and he can't even do what Beerus was doing, which was oops. Oh my god. It's been a long time since I've had to do this. There we go. So you see how I can go back into... Gogeta cannot do this. It's only this. It's only frame trap or reset or grab. Those are the only two options that he has. He could theoretically do this, which I don't know why more Gogetas don't, to be fair. Like, that's so stupid and so powerful. But, you know, whatever. Or Gogeta should do that. Very cool. But if they don't have an assist, like I mentioned, he's taking a big risk resetting on any of these buttons because the cancel windows are not that great. So what determines the cancel window? As we discussed earlier, block stun has a lot to do with it, but it's also, and this is where Gogeta kind of struggles, the startup of the next normal determines the cancel window. Because the less block stun you have on the preceding normal, but the longer startup on the next normal you have, that means that you must input your frame traps a lot sooner and a lot tighter, which makes them less ambiguous, which means that people are more likely to be correct when they disrespect you. For example, this is a 10 frame normal. Going into this, that's a 14 frame normal. The frame trap is neater, but I can't delay as long. Otherwise that happens. Even Krillin's shitty-ass jab beats me here. Maybe not there, though. Still win, but if I'm late, it's a lot harder to make that ambiguous versus... Oops. See? My God. Go. There we go. You guys get the idea. It's a little bit easier to frame trap that a bit more ambiguously than it is to frame trap this. It feels like just because the normal takes too long. And Gogeta's normals take way too long. That is an 11 frame 5LL. Most of them are 10 frames. Most 5Ms are usually between 9 and 10 frames. Some of them are even 8. Most 2Ms are usually 11 or 10 frames. This is 12. His 5H is pretty fast. Him lacking a traditional 5S is a big problem. Because he can't use this as a reset point. So he can't basically structure his... Like, the structuring of his pressure is very rigid. So, enough about Gogeta Blue. That brings us to a next point of what I mean when frame data doesn't matter. So that's -8. This is -2. So you might be thinking, oh my god, the frame trap between -2 should be way better than the -8 button. Let's find out. So I'm going to do 5M, 2M, 21 frames, 20 frames. I should theoretically be able to delay a lot more than this with 4M, right? 23 frames, but I'm pretty sure that's because I spaced them out. 21 frames. 23 frames, but I'm pretty sure it's because I spaced... Yeah, it's because I'm spacing him out. Let's do it with a real job. Notice how I can't really delay. It doesn't matter if I do 5M or 4M. What's going on here? Why do I still have the same 21 frame cancel window? Or 21 frame trap window? This should have way more frame advantage, right? Like, this is 4M, it's -2. So what does this actually mean? Basically, when it comes to staggering your pressure, not a lot. Not a lot. Because your frame data, how minus you are on block, doesn't actually change your frame trap window. Your frame trap window is always going to be the same. However, there is a big difference. And the big difference is usually between and the level of safety that I have here. If Gogeta, like, I could dash block after 4M. So 4M does have some uses. But if you might have noticed, if you pay attention to the way I pressure with Blue Goku, I do both. Why? Well, the reason why I do it is because even though this is very minus, what difference does it make if I'm true stringing or frame trapping into an even safer normal? Like, that is also -2. So why should I 4M all the time when I could just 5S? And I get the same levels of frame advantage. And I get a little bit of a mind game. Because if I do this, that's a very good way to get matched on. Even if I'm safe, I could lose my turn because it's -2. Of course people are going to dash block there. It's the only -2 button I have. So if I see 4M and I see a Blue Goku dash up, I might hedge my bets on mashing if he doesn't have an assist, because he's probably going to want to grab me. And now I'm kind of expecting him to do something here. Does that mean 4M is actually useless with Blue Goku? The way a lot of people use it? Yes. But do I think it's useless overall? No. Because it does have a very unique advantage. Which brings us to another point that's more important, in my opinion, than frame advantage. Pushback. Pushback basically occurs to when you're mid-screen. And notice how this forces the opponent farther and farther away from me. However, if I'm here, that actually pushes me back farther than if I do that. Notice how the 5M, this doesn't really advance. This does. This is important because this allows me to fine-tune my ranges. Because now I can delay even larger because, yeah, you might have a stupid frame trap, Jiren. Doesn't matter if you can't hit me. Doesn't matter if you can't reach me. And Blue Goku can now fine-tune his ranges in a way very, very few characters can. Because now I have normals that advance me back in, and those normals that advance me back in do create an advantage. Because I go back in, I can reset into my lights. I can't do that from 4M, but I can from 5M. See? Oops. Which means that my resets are now a lot more ambiguous. It can be hard to tell and micromanage your spacing. You may not know what you can and cannot mash on. You might not know what I'm going to do because the spacing is constantly changing, and because the spaces are changing, the timings of my threats are changing as well. So for example, if I do this, I have to kind of delay my IED. But if I do... Notice how that's a lot more instant, even though there was more recovery on the 5M. That's because I don't have to go as far of a distance. See? This is very important to keep in mind. Pushback, spacing, these things are very, very important. You don't want to worry too much about the frame advantage. I would recommend not even necessarily paying attention to the frame advantage when practicing your pressure or trying to find ways to start maneuvering your mediums and maneuvering your opponent into doing something, because it can be almost distracting. The biggest issue that I see with Krillin players is that they get so lost in the sauce where they're like, oh my god, I can make my 2M my 2M -2. It's like, good for you. But why don't you keep the chain going? Try finding the ways to make the chain ambiguous. Don't worry about your setups or anything like that, because at the end of the day, I don't really give a shit about how advantageous my 2M is, because I have this. And because of that, I can start really abusing respect. See? That can get pretty terrifying. And that's something to keep in mind that's more important than your frame data, especially if you have a threat that can make your frame data safe. Because here's the thing, right? Let me ask you this. Let's go back to the very basics of the beginning, right? Create respect, abuse respect. If I want to frame trap you, do I want you to respect me? No. No. Because then I have to mix you. If you respect me, I have to 50-50 you now, or I have to DR or beta reaction, or kill your lack of reactions. But I don't want you to respect me. Mash, you know? And then they mash. And then they die. And it's like, oh, well, you know, they jodí. I'm fucked. You know? I guess we'll just die. And because of that, you are late. I'm almost done. But that's kind of how you can work with situations like that. That's kind of how we can start pushing that. That's kind of how we can start creating really unique and ambiguous situations. But I want my opponent to mash if I'm going to frame trap them. But I want them to respect my resets. Why would anybody mash this? There's too much here. I can literally just... Oh my god, I can't do it. Dash, block, call, assist. Dash up, grab. Dash up, cross up. Oh, there's not going to be a VOD for this. Sorry, Cloud. You missed it. This is a one-time thing. Guys, press F in the chat for Cloud. for missing a pretty cool, pretty cool video because he's actually the one that requested this. Let's get some Fs in the chat. I'm sorry, man. This should be a video. This is cool. Thank you. It already is a video, to be fair. I had a 4-hour masterclass on pressure. You guys can watch that one. Don't worry. It's gonna be a VOD, guys. I wouldn't do that to you. Don't worry. I just kind of wanted to make you sweat a little bit. But yeah. Oh, my throat's really sore. My throat feels like tense. Like, actually tense. I've seen the pressure video 1,000 times. No, I mean, like, I did, like, a 4-hour masterclass on pressure in and out. That was very similar to this, but a little bit more structured. No, it's fine. Don't worry. It's gonna be a video. Don't worry, guys. It's okay. I got you. Don't worry. You guys are my boys. I got you. Anyway. Anyway. These are ways you can pressure with these characters and whatnot, and that's a pretty good idea of how you can route your pressure. It can give you ideas on how to keep your pressure ambiguous. We will talk about rhythm probably another time, if you know this one does well. And you know what, guys, if you guys want a rhythm class, you know what you can do? Go on YouTube. Okay, if you're watching this, like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell us what you think, let us know if this helps you or whatnot. We're probably going to make a shorter form video with a lot of these concepts, like, you know, we'll work on this with Star. But yeah, no, if you guys really want a rhythm masterclass, a rhythm stream, make sure you guys like, go ahead and subscribe on YouTube, you know, share us with your friends and whatnot, timestamps, send it to people, show our notes, make sure to show up in our thing, engage, share it on Twitter. That way, if you guys do that, that'll encourage me to make more of these videos. And it's free. It's not even asking you to subscribe to the Twitch, so A+. But yeah, anyway, that's pretty much gonna be where we wrap up here. I did have... Oh, wait, no. I have one last thing I do want to talk about. Because I do think that this is another thing that a lot of people really, really struggle with. When do you mix? Because here's a bigger issue. When I see, and this is particularly an issue in my more advanced students that practice what we do, y'all are like... And this is scary, but where's the mix? You know, where's the mix? Now, do you need mix to open up your opponent? No, but mix is very, very important. No, never stagger mix, stagger mix. No. You need to mix with purpose. Mix is actually very advanced. You might be wondering, when do I DR? Very simple. You want to DR based on how your opponent likes to disrespect. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say your opponent has a reflect habit. This is going to actually influence the way I mix. And the reason why is because, guys, have you fought Complex? Have you fought Dimensional? Have you fought Underrated T? These motherfuckers, there's no way you're going to open them up. If they want to block, they will block for days. They're young. They're young. They're kids, guys. I'm an old man. I'm 20. I'm going to be 28. I'm old. Some of you are even older than me. Some of us have jobs. Y'all really got time to sit here and have T block everything that you're doing? Fuck that, right? But here's the beautiful thing. T's going to tech every DR. But you can't tech DR if you reflect. Mixing is important, not because you want to beat and make your things unreactable, but because you need to control your opponent. Now, this is a very advanced topic. This is high level pressure, and we will be having many classes on this in addition to my and positioning in the more advanced classes that we're normally doing. But I'm going to basically shove that off into 2023, and we're going to work on building the concepts back up since I've spent so much time away. But, yeah, that DR is going to control that reflect. Because now, if my opponent reflects, there's nothing they can do. Now, here's the thing. What if I want to control that reflect? Now, here's the thing, right? He could tech the DR, but that's a completely different mix, right? This requires a completely different response than DR. And it's timed perfectly to his reflect timing. Ooh. You guys can have a lot of fun here. Midstream. Cross-ups. Very powerful for mitigating and controlling reflect. Very powerful. Very powerful, right? And then, of course, you have your big bombos. I should really practice that. But yeah, you have your big bombonis. You have your ways of attacking. There are multiple ways you can attack this reflect habit. And the reason why is because your opponent's always going to do something. Now, imagine if I do that, right? It controls your opponent's responses. It controls your opponent's responses. Because if your opponent, and by the way, this is preemptive, because if I do this, like, notice how my opponent's not really, like, let's pretend it's a real person. Notice how they're not really reflecting anymore. Notice how they're not really reflecting anymore. But here's the thing. If they're a very good player, and they see me IAD, but I don't IAD too often, and I'm keeping my options ambiguous, in addition to my pressure that we've seen me do pretty much the entire time, your opponent doesn't know how to respond to any of the mix-ups. They have no choice but to block them all. And when they have no choice but to respect them, oops, that's when you can start doing real fake shit. Real fake shit out of nowhere. Oh, you thought I was gonna... Oops, tiger knee? Nah. You thought I was gonna tiger knee. Oh, I decided to. Oh, lol, GG's, die. You know? And now you have a big thing. And also, playing with these reactions, if you guys play Gogeta Blue, or if you guys are 50-50s all the time, let's say you're watching this and let's say you only believe in 50-50s, then let me give you a small tip. Make your 50-50 stronger. How do you do that? Well, now I can do this, right? But what if I do this? Now you're adding a reaction on top of a guess. Or you can even... Very easy way to close out. You can start mounting threats on your 50-50s that make this character an even bigger nightmare. And you can do that with any of your characters too. That's not exclusive. If you're like, oh no, don't give Gogeta Blue another thing. He's not the only one. You can do this with any character. You can start stacking on reactions, abusing the respect, basically. And we are going to basically leave it here, guys. But that's why and when you should mix. You should mix in different places. Meaning, don't always go through a full stagger string, have them block it all, and then DR. Sometimes, just run up DR. Sometimes, just 6M. Keep them on their toes. You get hit by what you do not expect. If you want to open up T, if you want to open up the best players in the world, if you want to open up, like Complex, Yasha, whatever, whoever the fuck you're fighting, the easiest way to do that is to hit them with things that they do not expect. That is what they do to each other all the time. Hit your opponent with things they do not expect. We only block what we expect. So if they expect a 50-50, that's when you end up with some fun. But that's where I'm going to leave this rather lengthy stream off. But you know what? I'll take some time to answer questions. For those of you that don't know and are just joining us, I'm very sick, or I was very sick, and I had to take time off work, which unfortunately just creates a little bit of a financial strain. If you guys are feeling generous and whatnot, then please, I encourage you to donate, as it really does help me recover any of the lost wages. And if you don't want to donate for free and whatnot, if you donate even something as small as $1, I can go ahead and answer questions about a specific character if I know them. And if not, I can go ahead and take a look at them for you and help you determine what the best course of action is. But if you guys have any specific questions, anything related to this, any how-tos, if you want me to clarify anything, now is the time. You guys can ask me anything you'd like as long as it's related to the topic of the stream. What I find difficult about canceling is keeping the consistent and delay-based netcode. I mean, keeping the timing from medium to lights or other mediums. That just takes practice and experience. But it doesn't matter about keeping them consistent as long as you attack your opponent's threshold, which is something completely different I haven't talked about today. It's fine. It doesn't need to be so fast. You can slow it down if you need to. I'll try to throw a donor when I get paid. Budgeting is being difficult, and I want to help you out. I appreciate it. Like, if you can't donate, don't worry about it. Like, I appreciate the sentiment. Like, it honestly touches my heart. Even with the lay-based netcode changing timings on the fly. Yeah, I change timings all the time, even offline. I do not pressure with the same timings. There are times where I will be very fast, and then there are other times where I am like painfully slow. Depends on my opponent. Sometimes I can change timings depending on if I have a feel that my opponent is a little bit on the skittish side and a little bit antsy. I will slow it down in order to draw them out. Because here's the thing, right? Like, there's a strategy here, and we will be discussing the strategy of pressure, which is something that I haven't taught you guys yet. But it is something that'll be very, 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 very powerful once you guys have mastered your characters or your teams. But if somebody's very skittish and they get hit, they're most likely going to respect. We don't want them to respect. We want them to mash. So you have to start taking an increasing risk and eventually start baiting them and punishing them for not respecting. So you have to basically start encouraging them, giving them a little bit of hope into thinking that they can escape. No, they can't. That's the goal, guys. I'm not on Streamlabs anymore. Remember, I'm on OBS, so you might have to just don't donate directly to State of the Z Union. I have to figure a bunch of stuff out. But you guys might actually have to donate to stateofthezunion.contact@gmail.com, which is also the best email to reach us if you have any inquiries, by the way. But please don't, because, you know, you can just ask me on Discord or Twitter. But I have a question for you guys. So if you guys have any questions, you're free to ask them. But I have a question for you guys. What kind of casual content would you guys like to see from me? Because I want to start streaming a little bit more regularly, but it's a bit hard for me with my schedule at work. So like what kind of casual content do you guys want? Like do you want more educational content? Do you want me to start talking about like other things like my personal hobbies? Like do you guys want streams where you can come and hang out with me that's not Dragon Ball related? Do you want more Dragon Ball content? Like what kind of stuff do you guys want? Let me know. I'm very curious. And if you're watching this on YouTube and whatnot, feel free to let us know in the comments as well. We'd be very, very, very curious if you guys want to join us on Twitch. Which, by the way, now is a good time to mention if you're on Twitch or if you're on YouTube and whatnot, you're watching this on YouTube, join us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Weese's Training Grounds. We stream, generally speaking, every day of the week and on Saturday. However, our schedule has been kind of in a lull because of the holidays. But yeah, definitely consider it. Well, can I ask about Tohan and how I should go about setting up his pressure with him? Yeah. I will host more casual streams and more Dragon Ball related stuff. But let's see, Team Gohan. I'll do this because it mentioned that you wanted to donate, so and I'll assume that you probably will. But yeah, we can talk about Tohan. I'll talk about some of the strengths of Tohan and some of the weaknesses of Tohan, but I'm not gonna give you like a full rundown because honestly, it's better if you explore what works for you as a person. And what I would do is not necessarily the same thing that you should do. But I'll talk about some things that make him good and some things that maybe leave a little bit to be desired. So first things first about Tohan is Tohan has extremely short lights. Not as bad as Krillin, but definitely enough to matter. And he also has a very critical weakness that a lot of other characters don't, which is the inability to do this. Once you go into 5LL, the routing of your pressure completely changes. You now have to commit to the auto combo, go into mix, and stuff like that. You know, go into mix and whatnot, or just, you know, abort the whole thing altogether. You know? Like, you don't want to reset on this. Now, you can buy enough respect. Like, you can do, like, stuff like that. But, like, this is airborne. I don't know if... Does that beat... It probably beats 2H. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've played him. I mean, I guess Krillin would be the one to... Oh. That's hilarious. Does Goku Black lose? No. Oh, you cannot delay that. Oh, you cannot delay that. You cannot delay this. Oh my god. I could frame trap the 2H if I do that, which is good. You know? But, you know. If I'm late, that is very, very scary. That is very scary. So, generally speaking, avoid 5LL at all costs. Now, how do you structure his light pressure? Good thing is that his 2L's not bad, you know? So you want to basically do stuff like that with your lights. You know, keep yourself fairly close to the opponent. Buy some respect. 5M is good for resetting because it's very safe. You can get away with that quite a bit. And it's also a very powerful frame trap. It's the best one that you have that's unfortunate because you don't really have 5LL. But yeah. But you have a 5S. And this 5S is very good. That's the thing, though. Not as good. You have a new 5H as well, which is good. But this Lariat is a wee bit on the slower side, which might not be an issue. Like, that'll still win. But the problem is that it's harder to convert, right? Because here's the problem with Tohan's pressure. The problem is that, like, if I'm, like, Blue Goku, for example, like, and I'll just use Blue Goku, or, you know what, SSJ Goku as my, no, Blue Goku's probably better for this. I'll use Blue Goku as kind of my litmus test for pressure. I mean, it's kind of fucked up because he does probably have some of the best pressure in the game, full stop. But I think it's important to see how he handles certain situations and compare where other characters fall short. So, for example, like here, Blue Goku kind of has a little bit more structure to his light medium pressure because he can 5M do this, still hit with 5M, 5M, 2M, Team Gohan, however, that sucks because 2M is also kind of slow. So he can do that, but like you see how I'm like how automatic that 5M is for me. That's kind of that would be a deal breaker for me. As a not this is me personally. That this doesn't mean this character's trash. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do this pattern. This pattern is very powerful with every character, but he has a less flexible version of it than I'm used to with Blue Goku, who could just, you know. Now, that's kind of privileged. I'm not going to pretend like it isn't, but this is underprivileged. This is a poverty normal. Like, this is... Like, that's a poverty normal. You know, you can start doing stuff like that, but this is where things start becoming a problem for Gohan. The biggest one is that everything is very linear. You don't have access to this unless you want a leg mix, which is a problem. Now you could do this, you know, you could probably keep that up, which is neat, but this is less flexible. You have fewer options, and this is kind of where this character begins to struggle. Because now 5M is only a realistic possibility after 2M, which means that the 2M is a lot less likely to be successful, and it's a lot harder to buy respect, but it's still not bad, because you still have 5S, you know? And then you have this, which is powerful, but then it brings me to my next problem. Right? On hit. Like, if I set the bot to guard random, my bad, hang on. If I set the bot to guard random, right? See? Easy confirm. He says as he drops it, but you guys get the idea. Like, this is a very easy confirm from my pressure. And if they don't get hit, easy continuation of my pressure. This is where Tohan kind of becomes unfavorable. Because that's -5. I don't like that. Because this actually ruins the confirm. See? Depending on the assist, this can actually ruin the confirm. Like, for those of you that don't know, if Gohan gets the hit here, okay? Oops. Like, look at that damage, and I'm just fucking around. Like, if that hits you midstream, we can get really funky with it. I don't even know the root there. If you get hit with 236M, which leads to a much better confirm, like, you are in a world of hurt. You can also spark and kill. Like, this is a TOD starter for Gohan. Now, this is where things kind of become an issue, right? Like, that might work, but what about... That can destroy my confirm. Good. That hits them. That keeps them in. Good. But still, that creates a very unshaky, kind of shaky situation. Fortunately, the assists that I'm currently using don't seem to cause too much of a problem, but then I'm thinking about, like, base Q. You know what I mean? Like, would a character like base Q be okay? And maybe so. It's not that big of an issue, but that is a problem. And then it brings us to the next issue. The next issue, specifically, you have one true mix-up, which is this. Versus very powerful, but very spacing specific, and if your opponent can call it out, they can 2H you, and Zamas and Jiren do not fucking care. They do not care about this mix. So they will. No, don't cross up J. Why would you cross up JS? Don't do that. I guess you could do that. Yeah, I guess you could do that. Why not? But this is so much easier to block, though. And it's very easy to whiff. Like, this is unreactable. Like, this is very difficult to react to. That's the advantage of doing this. If you're doing cross-up JS, play a different character. Like, if you're doing cross-up JS at that point, just play a different character. Yeah, this is very easy to react to. Very easy to react to. And not only that, but they also might start super dashing you. They also might start super dashing you preemptively if they know that you do it between 2S and JS. Nah, it's not worth it. I'll just do this. But regardless, point is, Team Gohan, very strong. As telegraphed, I tried doing something I could do at any point in time, but it can lose to a lot of things at that point. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. Oh, fuck. Ow. Ow, 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 ow. But yeah, these are definitely things that you guys need to think about a little bit more potently. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't think that this is the best. It's nice that you're feeling better. Thank you, Torque. I appreciate it. I'm still not feeling great, but you know, who knows? But yeah, no, that's the thing about Team Gohan is that his pressure is very limited. It's a very linear pressure structure, which isn't as flexible or as versatile as something like Beerus or Blue Goku. Now, here's the thing. Does that mean Team Gohan is bad? Do I think Team Gohan is low tier? Yes, this character is trash. He's SSJ Vegeta. No, I'm kidding. Let me see if I can still do these. No, I can't. But yeah, no. Regardless, do I think that this character is bad? No. Do I think that people, if you play him, should you drop him? Of course not. I think you are always going to be stronger with the weapon that you are the most comfortable with, and if Team Gohan is that guy for you, don't drop him. Like, Team Gohan is worth it. You could still make it valuable. He's still gonna mix. He's just not gonna have as flexible of a time as Blue Goku or like characters like this. So depending on how you structure your pressure and whatnot, depending on what you do, it can be a little bit more difficult for him to open people up, but you know, eventually everyone makes a mistake, and in his case, if they make a mistake, they're dead. Yeah, so it's not necessarily the best, but I would not worry about jail mix being telegraphed because any mix you do is telegraphed. Like, Team Gohan does not really have a point blank cross up, in case you haven't realized that. Like, you have to be able to hit people that are not standing. So that works on the... But this is very, very easy to kind of see. Meanwhile, like, Like that is so much more sudden and so much more dangerous. Like you're basically telegraphing the same thing. It's not wise. Don't do this. Like I have to remember how to do his bomb rushes. Uh, but yeah, that's it for Team Gohan. I'll take my check in the mail. Do you use Team Gohan? I do not. I used to, but I haven't in quite some time. And by some time, I mean like literal years. Like I have not used him since season 3 began. This is not my character anymore. I would argue he never was, but you know, yeah, he's not my guy. Also, another big problem you have this, which could be good for empty lows, but it makes him susceptible to fuzzy mashing. So definitely be very careful with this. Back in the olden days, yeah. Eddie, unironically, would you care if I went back to Team Gohan? Like, would you be happy or would you be completely indifferent? Indifferent? Yeah, I figured. Dead character. Well. But yeah. Do you guys have any questions for me? Anything that you want to ask before we ship out? He's kind of dead. He's pretty dead. Play Blue Goku instead. Oh, no question. Who's not in the Discord? What do you mean who's not in the Discord? I say that as a Team Gohan player myself. Yes. Hmm. I think I can kind of optimize that. But I'll do that on my own time. But thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night, everybody. Oh, that'd be really sweet. Okay, I'll wait till you give this up. He's living in our hearts. Nah, man, he's living in the grave where he belongs. Fuck that guy. Teen Gohan was a menace. I'm trying, man. Thanks. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for supporting me today. I really appreciate you guys. All right. We have a gift sub. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are sick. I hope you guys have a wonderful time. Fuzzy, can you get that for me, please? I will wait till Fuzzy sign. Is Fuzzy even here? Does Fuzzy even exist? Is Fuzzy even fucking real? No, Fuzzy's not here. That bitch. Saber, can you fix this? Saber, send the link. Fuzzy isn't real. How is Dimensional not a mod, actually? That work? Yes, it did. Look, Dim, you have a look, Dim, you have a gun now. All right, guys, but thank you all so much. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night, y'all.